How was your weekend, Lucas?
It was good. Yeah. I got my daughter by myself on Sundays and we had a good day. We went to Polly's pet shop here and she absolutely loves it. They have lemurs, they have toucans, they have great reptiles set up. And so it's a really nice place. We went to the park after and,
that may be the cutest pet shop name I've ever heard in my life.
Polly's Pets, right?
Yeah. It's like good. Polly Pockets.
Exactly. No, it's a great place. And they just redid it about a year and a half ago. And every single one of the reptiles is bio-natural. So they have UV lighting. They have isopod setups. It's set up it's legit. It's a good place. Okay. Once I breed my carpet pythons and things like that, I'd be interested in seeing if they would sell a couple there just to see them there. They have really cool setups. So,
yeah. Well, next time I'm out there, I'm going to have to come check that out.
Yeah.
But anyways, welcome everyone to episode 84 of the Retic Lounge. This episode, we're going to go into another species spotlight, but we're going to be focusing this time on boas. We have someone that I'm really excited to talk to. Dr. Warren Booth. He's a scientist with a background in genetics. He's made significant contributions to the field of reptile research from his work on evolutionary genetics and Parth Genesis. You guys have already seen him on other podcasts like Trap Talk and Triple B TV. He's just a wealth of knowledge. So we're excited to talk all about boas tonight.
Yeah, and I'm going to be honest, we were talking a little bit about this. It was kind of difficult coming up with the questions on the guide because boas are beautiful, but they don't always excite me. But then I was
have you owned one?
When I was young, I had an Argentine boa and a common boa. I also had a Colombian rainbow boa growing up.
See, I'm so bad with boas. I'm not extremely sure what I had. I had a little hypo boa. Super hypo, BCI, BCC.
I don't know. See, that's what I'm saying. So it was hard to come up with a question. So, with the wealth of knowledge that Dr. Booth is, we'll have him back on to geek out with the scientific stuff and all that. But today, our spotlight is just to talk about boas, a little bit about his science background and, how he's contributing to, research. But yeah, I'm actually, it was hard and we pushed this one off for a bit, but I'm excited because, with ignorance and the opportunity to learn from someone on a species that might not be the most interesting to me, I might come out getting another snake like I did with carpets. So
as always, this is a sales pitch to Lucas. Let's see if we can add another species to the garage. I usually discourage it, but at this point, I'm just rooting it on.
Right. Thank you.
I've turned a new leaf.
There you go. I like it. Don't resist what you can't stop.
All right. Well, let's bring him in, Lucas.
Whether you've poured your heart and soul into your reptile business or you've just begun your business journey, AE Foundry has you covered with next level expertise in graphic design, motion graphics, videography, photography, and so much more. If you've been dying for a new logo for your reptile business, motion graphics for your current logo, a new website, or need assistance making your video podcast come to life, then listen carefully. AE Foundry's mission places storytelling at its core. AE Foundry believes that a distinctive story and background are the driving forces that set your brand apart. In today's market, consumers seek more than just products. They crave a connection built on trust with the brands they cherish. AE Foundry is committed to empowering small businesses and fostering authenticity that resonates with their consumers. Reach out to them and let them help you craft a visual narrative that helps establish a genuine and lasting connection with your audience. To contact AE Foundry, email them at aromero@aefoundry.com or on Instagram @AEFoundry. When it comes to housing your retics, trust me, you're going to want an enclosure that will be just as strong and durable as your reticulated python. The Heartland Reptile Enclosure is next level tough and will outlive you and your retic by several generations. Heartland Reptile Enclosures are designed and manufactured out of powder-coated aluminum to provide the highest quality and longevity available in the reptile enclosure. What makes them even better is they are lighter than your PVC and plastic enclosures out there and are extremely tough. Stop playing around with plastic enclosures for your large constrictors and step up your enclosure game with the Heartland Reptile Enclosure. To inquire about one of these enclosures, speak to Jordan himself at Heartland Reptiles on Instagram, Facebook, and on TikTok.
We also want to thank VivTech Products for being an affiliate sponsor of the Retic Lounge. Stop by VivTech Products for the best UV spectrum lighting on the market that will enhance and improve your snake's overall well-being and health. Visit VivTechProducts.com and use the code ReticLounge23 today for 15% off. Again, visit VivTechProducts.com and use our affiliate code ReticLounge23 today for 15% off. Looking for the perfect accessories for your hatchlings or juvenile retics? Look no further than Heliguy Serpents. Our sponsor, Chris Sexton, is coming in hot with an amazing 3D printer, creating top-notch perches and other caging accessories for your beloved pets. Enrich your retics environment with their high-quality products. Use our promo code TRL10 for a 10% discount on your purchase. Visit them today at HeliguySerpents.com and start giving your pets the best. Heliguy Serpents, the premier source for 3D printed caging accessories. Again, that's www.heliguyserpents.com and use our promo code TRL10 for 10% off all of your 3D printed accessories today.
All right,
Welcome.
Dr. Booth.
Hey guys, how are you?
Good.
Doing well.
Good.
Excellent.
Good to see you again. I know I saw you just a few times when we would go to Chris Eaton's little hangouts, and I think that's really the only interactions that we had for the most part. And I don't know if you're still going to those, but I know he had one yesterday. I need to try and start making them again.
Yeah, I popped on yesterday for like 10 minutes, 15 minutes, but again, it's difficult with me. That's about the time that I put my kids to bed.
Yeah.
Does he still have the angry energy now that he has a hot new girlfriend?
I don't think so. He seemed pretty laid back.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
Yeah.
I really need to jump in.
Right.
We need to put that fire
fun.
back in him.
That was Nathan's first shot of fame right there. 15 minutes of lame. He was in the running.
He took me on way too early.
But
I don't know what he was thinking.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I think I did a show with him as well. That was fun. I enjoyed that. He's a funny guy, and since then we've texted back and forth frequently, and we got on well. He's a good guy.
Chris is a good dude.
Yeah, I can appreciate people in the reptile industry that like true comedy and keep it real, and can have that good sense of humor that's needed in a dark world. So, But anyways, if you don't mind, let's jump in. If you could give us an overview of like your educational background as well as your background in reptiles, and kind of just like tell our listeners who you are.
Sure. From Belfast, Northern Ireland, and I did my degree in genetics and a PhD in evolutionary genetics back there at Queen's University of Belfast. And then at that point in time, my PhD was working on kind of evolutionary genetics of small mammals. Understanding how habitat transitions and cyclical changes in population size affect the evolutionary trajectory of populations. When I finished that, I applied for a postdoctoral position in North Carolina at NC State. And at that point, I was switching to work on urban pest insects. But for me, it didn't really matter the system. I was just interested in the questions were kind of cool. And if it involves DNA, then I'm happy to do it. And I got offered that position, and I ended up staying there for nearly 7 years.
Oh, wow.
At that point in time, towards the end of it, I'd been developing molecular markers to test for population genetic studies for a whole bunch of species. And I was at a meeting, and some friends were telling me they were going to start working on a project on Hog Island boas, but they needed molecular markers developed. And I told them I would develop the markers for them. So I did that, and I sent the markers, the information for the markers to them. And at the same time, I had just maybe I'd been on the board of USARK, well, since its beginning. So I've been on the board maybe for 4 years or so. And Jeff Ronnie is a good friend of mine, and he said that he had a friend who needed a paternity test done on a boa. She had, there was a woman called Sharon Moore. So if you've heard of the Boa Woman Caramel line, it was her line. she had a female that she'd paired with 4 males, needed to know which male was the father because it produced a whole bunch of these caramel albinos. Turns out the markers that I developed I could use for this. So I now was in the paternity business for snakes. And it turned out that was Parth Genesis, and that just kind of went worldwide in the media. And as a result of that, I got a bunch of other reports, a bunch of other samples that would just come in every couple of weeks, every couple of months. I would get samples sent from people, which has resulted in a whole slew of different publications in that field. Around that time, I then moved to a faculty position at the University of Tulsa in Oklahoma, and I was there for 10 years. And then at the end of 2022, I was approached by Virginia Tech about an endowed chair position in urban entomology, which is what I have now. So I moved here in to Blacksburg, Virginia, in January of last year, and I've been here a year. That first 6 months, I spent every 2 weeks driving back and forth between Tulsa and Blacksburg. So it's 1,032 miles door to door, which wasn't fun. Thankfully, I had a friend in Knoxville, which is on the way, that kept all of my snakes.
Okay.
But I had a spring of, I had 6 months of those back and forth driving. But we moved here finally in July last year, and so now I've been busy setting up my lab here at Virginia Tech.
I was gonna say, that drive is intense. I was gonna originally say my condolences for just moving to the U.S., but the drive I think even tops that. But I graduated.
At least he had a good rest stop with some reptiles.
Right, exactly. I graduated just north of Knoxville in Kentucky at University of the Cumberlands. So
okay.
Small little college out there, nice place. But I'm gonna let Nathan kind of jump into the next question, and then I probably have some follow-ups because I'm a little mind blown with the Parth Genesis and what's happening in my collection right now.
Sure.
Yeah, can you just kind of dive into your work with cottonmouths and how that works in with the Parthenogenesis work?
Yeah, so the cottonmouths are just one of the systems that we discovered Parthenogenesis in. Initially it was Boa Constrictors, and then a couple months later it was in Colombian rainbow boas. We documented that, and then a few months later it was copperheads, cottonmouths, and then reticulated pythons, ball pythons. Maybe a
Lucas can definitely speak on the reticulated python.
And then just last year, we documented it in American crocodiles. So the first instance in crocodiles, which was kind of cool. But my work in that it started initially just, as I said, in this paternity test and documenting it. But given that it's such an unusual and kind of fascinating system for many, it went worldwide in the media. And that really established me as the person that could then test samples for people. And because I was in the reptile hobby, I also knew a lot of people in it, and they would contact me through it and ask me if I could test samples for them. But it's since then we've expanded that work to look at not just documenting cases of it. I don't really do that anymore, but we're more interested in the mechanisms kind of governing it, and also what happens. So we worked on what happens to venom whenever parthenogenesis occurs, because whenever we have parthenogenesis, you're not getting a clone of the mother, you're getting essentially a half clone. The egg fuses with a byproduct of the egg, which contains an almost identical set of chromosomes, so it makes it almost homozygous across its genome. So what happens to venom genes whenever that happens? There's a whole slew of venom genes, and we documented that in copperheads. We were planning to do some in king cobras. We documented parthenogenesis in king cobras as well a couple of years ago. And then we're now looking at the real mechanisms that drive it. So we're just in the process of sequencing the Boa Constrictor genome to a chromosome scale, which means that we'll know it's not just fragments of DNA, which is what we see for many genomes. This will be the actual full chromosomes. And we'll be able to understand where in the chromosomes we're seeing variation occurring and so on. So hopefully it'll help us understand kind of the drivers of parthenogenesis. We think there's a couple of key genes that are involved, but we can't nail that down just yet.
Okay. Because that was going to be...
sorry, were you saying that you're seeing variations in like venoms of parthenogenesis offspring?
So the venom, which is interesting, we expected to see some variation, some noticeable variation, but we didn't.
Oh, okay.
Which kind of shows us that there's a lot of selection on those venom genes to maintain at a certain level of probably homozygosity across the whole set of genes.
Yeah.
That's
So
really interesting.
between the mother and the parthenogens, we were seeing no real difference.
I mean,
Unfortunately, parthenogens don't do well. Parthenogens in general are dead within weeks or a couple of years, so they don't tend to do well.
yeah, and I know in retics, there's been some that have lived, 8+ years and have had other clutches from non-partho clutches, but I'm almost wondering if that's the exception to the majority of cases. I mean, it obviously it seems like it is, but yeah, one of the big questions I was going to ask you is why does it happen, or how does it happen? Looks like you're still diving into there, so TBD.
Yeah, so we think there's a couple of genes involved. So there was work done on parthenogenesis in domestic turkeys in the 1970s, and they believed that they could select for females that produce predominantly through parthenogenesis, and they could increase that selection, so the greater likelihood that a female was going to produce parthenogenetically in subsequent generations. And they believed that it was down to a single gene. There was work done published last year on fruit flies, on Drosophila, that identified 3 genes. And if those 3 genes were in different combinations, that would increase the propensity for parthenogenesis. So my feeling has always been that it's a heritable trait. And the reason I say that is that I've seen multiple females that are related, all producing parthenogenetically. I think it was Frank Martin years ago sent me samples of Boa Constrictors, or motley boas, and they were siblings, they were sisters, and they had all produced parthenogenetically, which suggests that it's not just a random event. It suggests that there's a genetic underpinning to it. And the fact that we, in the hobby, have a tendency to inbreed animals out the wazoo, then the likelihood is that you're selecting for genes that are linked to parthenogenesis, and therefore we're going to see it at a higher frequency. And the other reason we see it at a higher frequency is that we're all breeding color morphs and pattern morphs, and therefore,
right.
We've all become very good geneticists, even if people haven't graduated high school and, they don't know anything else about genetics. They can have a pretty good understanding of Mendelian genetics. Absolutely. And as a result of that, we see, people will be able to predict what they expect to see in a litter or a clutch. And therefore, when they don't see it, but they see an alternative form, then it's a pretty good indicator.
Yeah. I just, since I've moved and not even since, when I was keeping on a gradient, upstairs in my house, my first wild-caught Calatoas clutch, she produced, very weak clutch, only have one survivor here. And the more and more that I talked to you a little bit about it, and the more that I'm seeing, like, she was weak from the start. I had to force feed her for a while. She was never going to be a breeder for me. It was just the first snake I ever produced. So it had like sentimental, value. And, what's interesting is that you say they, for the most part don't live long. She was doing okay, but I've noticed she's 3 years old now. She's smaller than the 2-year-olds from the same mom, but that actually there's a sire. And she's starting to lose a little bit of her like muscularity.
Yeah, so that's what we've seen.
Yeah.
So Knoxville Zoo has a parthenogenetic reticulated python. We published a paper in 2014 from samples that were sent to us from St. Louis Zoo. They had a number of I don't know, I forget how many of it. I would need to go back to the paper, but they had 10 or 15 parthenogens. One of those was sent to Knoxville Zoo, and I was visiting there last year because a friend of mine, Michael Ogle, is the zookeeper there. He's the head curator of the reptiles there, and he showed me this reticulated python and told me it was produced through parthenogenesis, and I was like, oh yeah, I tested that one.
Oh wow.
And it's big. It's, I don't know, it's 12 or 14 feet. I would say it's a pretty big snake, and it looks pretty healthy. We've had parthenogenetic boas survive up to about 8 years of age. Smaller than normal, kind of stunted. They look smaller. They don't behave the same way. And I even got one to reproduce, and it produced 9. It produced 9 offspring, but 4 of those were stillborn.
Okay. Yeah.
Or 4 or 5 were stillborn. But the weird thing was, so I bred it to a male, and we got males and females. That led us to the work where we identified boas and pythons as having XX, XY sex chromosomes, not the ZZ, that was always assumed. But those 4 offspring were great. They raised up perfectly fine. I gave them to a friend. I also had a ball python. There was a parthenogen that herself that she produced a clutch of eggs and produced a parthenogen from herself. That secondary parthenogen didn't do very well. And it got to about 3 years of age. It never grew as fast and just didn't do well, and it died. The ball python parthenogen, the mother of that, I bred to a male. Whenever I had ball pythons, I bred to a clown, and I produced a male double het clown albino, and it was fine.
Yeah.
That female never recovered, just like the boa constrictor. Those females never recovered after giving birth, and they died within about 4 months.
Oh man!
But you're right about the loss of musculature. We normally see if they survive to about 3 years. That's whenever we normally see that loss of that kind of muscular.
Okay, so that's good to know, because I've had, so she parthoed that one time. She then parthoed again for me after her good clutch when I was trying to give her the year off, and I was like, please, like, don't breed. Right. And she did it herself, and, you know, stubborn as hell, but she did it. And I had some animals that weren't okay, and I had some that were like had great vigor, you know. I then had a Philippine who I paired with a Kalatoa, and the animals came out identical Philippines. And we've seen now what a Philippine super dwarf combination looks like. Looks nothing like those. And only 2 out of the clutch made it, but those 2 off the bat, just thriving, big, you know, and now I have a lone egg survivor that just pipped and is still in the egg from a ternate female that was a 4-year-old virgin. I did not want to breed her because she had a mini tiny, like I'm talking about less than a centimeter prolapse that, you know, was chronic for about 2 months. And, you know, I treated it, and I talked to my vet about it, and he told me what to do. And it ended up being okay, but I was like, I'm not going to breed you this year, and I might not even breed you next year. But again, decided to do it on her own.
Right.
And so now I got one in the egg that, you know, got a nice big belly. I'm just waiting for it to crawl out to see what happens. And, you know, our Discord, our Patreon makes, you know, I don't know if they make fun of me. I feel like they're making fun of me because they call me
the Partho King.
Yeah, they call me the Partho King, and I'm like, dude, that's not something to brag about. I'm doing something wrong. Like
something in the water,
right?
Yeah.
Like,
there's clearly a driver, right? It's like having a lot of us will have genes that will predispose us to cancer. It doesn't mean that we'll get cancer, right? But as soon as there's an environmental trigger, it can lead to the development of cancer. I think the same thing happens with parthenogenesis. I think those genes that are involved require an environmental trigger. Whatever that environmental trigger is, we don't know. And unfortunately, that's something that will be really incredibly difficult to study because of the sample sizes that you would require to test it. Yeah.
I'll send you some samples of my water, and then I'll get an RO system set up to see if it changes things. But geez, dude,
I had a guy contact me a couple of years ago, and he had a male that he bred to 3 or 4 different unrelated females who were ball pythons, and all 3 or 4 produced parthenogenetically. They were not related to each other, but they all bred the same male. And whenever he bred them to different males, they produced sexually. So there was something going on.
So that actually, it's funny you say that, because the that one Kalatoa, when she decided to cycle on her own, I was like, well, you know what? She's off of food. She looked big. So I threw in a TK Super Dwarf male in with her, who is the same TK Super Dwarf male that I threw in with the Philippine female, and those were the 2 that parthoed for me.
There you go.
And then I put the Philippine male with the Philippine female this year, and she has a perfect clutch in the incubator.
Oh, interesting.
So it's funny you say that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Just indeed.
Males can't get the job done.
It's kind of fascinating. Yeah, it's a fascinating system.
It is.
And I've had parthenogenetic babies in litters of boas, where you've got a bunch of sexually produced babies and then a couple of parthenogens, because you can have that as well, right? You know, it doesn't need to be a complete clutch of parthenogens. It could be a partial clutch of parthenogens and a partial clutch of sexually produced. And I've seen that in boas. I've had it produced. I've had it here a number of times, and it's not fun, because you look at it and you're like, well, that's kind of a dead end. You know, there's nothing much you can do with it. You know,
right?
In most cases, retakes, if they're thriving, then I think it's interesting. You know, I think raising them up as far as you can, if they can reach adulthood and you can breed them, I think it's a pretty interesting thing to do.
Yeah, and I'm sure it happens far less than the opposite end. But I will say that 75% of the Partho babies that have come out of the egg for me have not been thriving, or they had kinks, or they had issues, and just, they were dead basically out the egg.
Mhm.
And I'd say about 25% just were eating right away and just showed to have a lot of strength and vigor. And we'll see how those end out.
Yeah. Keep me posted.
Yeah. I mean, shoot, I'll probably have 20 more clutches here in the next few years. If you want one, let me know.
The way things are trending,
Man, it's
Oh, man.
annoying. I mean, it's fascinating, and I actually do appreciate it, because if you guys haven't seen like a Partho animal, they typically have the craziest tricked out patterns versus like what you would, especially with me with locality stuff, and that's what it's happening to. Like the one that's in the egg, the ternate right now, just looks insane. It looks nothing like what you would picture a ternate would. So that's the fascinating part, but also at the same time, I'm trying to breed locality animals. And when you end up with a Partho, when you're trying to create more locality of an animal we can't import, it's frustrating.
Mm-hmm. That's just so it doesn't spread to your green tree pythons.
Dude, don't even start there, man. What's a Partho or Roo gonna do? No one can even get them to eat in the first place.
Mm.
Oh,
Yeah.
man. Nathan, I could talk about this for hours. So Nathan, please take us into Boas.
I know you could.
Take us into Boas. I was telling Nathan today, I was like, hey, we're not going to talk about Parthos too long. And we're here 30 minutes into the episode talking about Parthos. So Nathan, take us into Boas.
I've got an interview tomorrow morning with NPR, because there's a round ray, a stingray down in North Carolina aquarium, which is all over TikTok apparently, because it's going to produce parthenogenetically.
Oh, that's
and
awesome.
I've been getting bombarded for interviews about what parthenogenesis is. So I've got an interview tomorrow morning about it. And it's not even what I do in my lab. Right? All the parthenogenesis stuff has been like hobby research.
Right.
It's not at all what we do in my lab as the mainstay. So it's kind of funny that I end up talking so much about it.
I love NPR. If you haven't been on before, well, I don't know.
I have, yeah.
I was going to say it was a while ago, but
10 or 11 years ago, I think.
Yeah. They're a great bunch to talk to. You'll have fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right, Nathan, take us into Boas, please.
Well, I mean, as Lucas and I were talking about at the start of the episode, we're kind of, not too educated into the
True
world
novice.
of boas. Yeah, I've had one. Like I said, don't truly know what it was. Definitely not a snake I love owning. I can't read them at all, but there's so many out there. But before we get too deep into it, can we talk a little bit about your love for emerald tree boas and your work you do with BoaBooth?
I know this isn't an emerald, but it's a basin and it's a boa.
It's a basin.
I wore this for the episode.
Very good. I like it.
I found my closest one.
Yeah.
I was like, it's an anaconda. We'll work it out.
Yeah, I've got anaconda emeralds, but I don't have any basins. One day, I've just been fascinated by Corrales Tribos for, I don't know, I've been keeping snakes for 30 years, and the first ones that I really got into were the Amazon tree boas and then emerald tree boas. So I've had them pretty much continually for that time. There was a short period of time where I didn't have them when I moved to the US, but now in the last, 5 years, I kind of went pretty deep into them again. So I've got a pretty decent group of Suriname, Guyana, emerald tree boas, both the patterned phase and the they're called the anaconda phase because they look almost like an anaconda pattern. So they're really cool.
I do like that one a lot.
Yeah, they're neat. Yeah, so I've got a nice group of those here. Yeah, there's a picture there. So that female she's probably just under 6 feet. I was just actually setting that other one up in a new enclosure tonight, but she's about 6 feet in length and eats adult rats. Girl. Yeah, so people think about emeralds as being these delicate snakes you got to feed small meals to. All of my emeralds that are that size are eating large adult rats.
That's amazing.
Once every 3 to 4 weeks. She's wild caught as well. So she was part of an anaconda group that I got about 3.5 years ago. Never been wormed, never been to a vet. And it's just the whole thing thriving. Is just establishing them, getting them established in the start is the difficult thing, but they're great snakes.
Yeah.
How's the temperament on most of your emeralds?
During the day, they sit on a branch and they ignore you. But that picture was taken at about 1 in the
As
morning.
far as having to get hands on with them.
I never have to.
Okay.
Yeah, so
we don't do that.
One of the guys that got me into retics, he gets really hands on with his emeralds, and actually the day I fell in love with retics, he had some of it. He had some of his emeralds out. And I mean,
that dude's got
were
a
joy to
special
handle, but I think it may just be him.
Yeah, he's got a special relationship with all of his animals. It's crazy what some people can do, but yeah,
I mean, he's petting all of his emeralds on the nose.
Yeah, you can do that during the day. Yeah, you can do that during the day.
Yeah, it works during the day when I've seen that. So
yeah, the thing is that they're not structured in a way that they're laterally compressed. So if you take them out, they're not comfortable kind of whenever they're taken out and handled. So I just ignore mine. In fact, here you see that I used to use, kind of natural wood and so on.
Yeah.
In the last few weeks, I've just switched them all out to PVC tubes, kind of twisted PVC, just because it's much easier to take that out of the enclosure if I'm cleaning or whatever. It's not as pretty as that there. I really liked it whenever I had the natural branches and stuff, but I had to switch over. But I've got a decent group of emeralds, and I produce them every other year generally. That's one of the babies I produced, I think, 2 years ago. Maybe 3 years ago.
See, this is where I'm in trouble. I'm gonna hit you up when you have some anacondas, some anaconda tribos. Man.
I've got some pairs put together at the moment, so that's
sweet. Good.
Yeah, that's what I really like.
He's gonna love me.
Yeah. So I've got a bunch of emeralds. I've got 5 species of corallus. So I've got the emeralds. I've got the Amazon tribos, but only a small group of those. But I work with the leopard phase.
Oh, they're fun.
And then
you consider that fun? They're freaking. They're
little
firecrackers.
They're little shoelace missiles.
They're cute, but they'll F you up.
Yeah, that there is a Corallus ruschenbergeri. That's from Venezuela.
Oh, nice.
They almost remind me of like really skinny like Boega.
Oh yeah.
So
possibly.
They are in many ways, and the thing about Amazon Tribo is they're kind of floppy. That's a hybrid. That's an Emerald Amazon hybrid.
We're going to talk about that here in a second.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. I just set up the enclosure for that there. But Amazons, the Hortolana, are just kind of floppy. They rarely strike. If they strike, they rarely contact. Ruschenbergeri are a different story. The Ruschenbergeri from Trinidad and from that's a Trinidad. Ruschenbergeri, they're very uniform bronze or yellow.
I'm sorry, I'm laughing. Nathan is just like, he is hitting the pictures right on the money, like he knows what he's doing, but he's not. He's totally guessing.
Hey, let it ride, Lucas. Let it ride.
Yeah, like, and then the mother is right beside it. If you click on the one beside it, that's the mother of it.
Oh man, that's great.
Yeah, so that's the mother of those.
They're beautiful.
She's about 7 feet long and eats adult rats.
I've always loved them. And I was born in Chile, so I've always like been interested and fascinated with South American species. And Amazon tribos have been pretty high on the list, but just every video I ever see of them they're just winding up, ready to take your face off.
Yeah, there's a lot of people with captive bred ones that are really, really plastic. But again, that requires you going and handling and stuff. I rarely handle. I rarely handle even my regular boas. It's just not something I've ever felt the desire to do. I'm more happy just hands off and watching them. So, and I would definitely never handle a Ruschenbergeri because they will light you up. They are the total opposite of Amazons in that they are on point and they will strike at you and they will connect with you. Thankfully, I've never been bitten, but I've been pretty close. And then I've got annulated tree boas, which are the opposite because annulateds are just like a ball python. You take them out and they're really placid.
Okay, cool. So they'll
actually ball up into your hand.
I got my entry.
And then I've got Corallus granadensis, which are pretty rare. They're a granite bank tree boa. Look like Amazons, but just from another locality. So that I think I've got five different species of Corallus, but I've got a lot of them, unfortunately. But they're a lot of fun.
Awesome. Now I want to ask you, Nathan pulled up that post. If you could try to find it again, the hybrid of the Emerald Tribo, Amazon Tribo, that recently came up and kind of was, rummaging Facebook and social media for the last 3-4 days. We did this episode perfectly timed for it, but the claim is that it was captured like that. Is that
No, it's the mother. So it's the mother of. So I've got one. Dayton Croydon has got one as well. So with ours, they came from the same litter. It was a female emerald that was brought in gravid and produced offspring within a month or two of being, I think a month or so of being brought into captivity into a shop in Las Vegas. And it dropped a litter that contained both regular emeralds and I think 3 hybrids. I contacted them because the thing is the hybrids in the past have never done well. We're talking about Parthenesians not doing well. Hybrid Emerald Amazons were the same. When you look back, the Barkers had a litter produced 20 years ago. Stan Shiras had a litter born about 18 or 20 years ago. John Martin produced 2 litters in captivity. And then there's another couple were brought in, and none of them ever did well. These ones, this one here and Dayton's one are thriving. Like this one here eats. She's now currently on large adult mice. And if you go way back earlier into my Instagram, you'll see her as a baby. She was kind of brown in color. And then I've got pictures. I need to create one of those. With the babies that you put, with children. You do that first year. Of how they changed. I plan to do it with that snake because it went from. I would never have predicted it would have turned blue. A kind of blue gray
right.
as it went through its color change. Because if you go way, but you can see it like there, it's a little bit muddier. And as you keep going back in this in these pages, you'll see that it's a totally different snake. It won't even look like the same thing, which is kind of remarkable.
So they go through an OCC.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. And so the picture. So this did occur and happen in the wild, and just they were laid in captivity.
Right. So the idea was, there's two kind of ideas behind it. One is that the female emerald was bred by an Amazon and an emerald in the wild.
Yeah.
Or that she was bred by an Amazon and an emerald in the holding facility in South America. I kind of think it's the earlier, the former. I think she was bred in the wild, and the reason I say that is that she gave birth so quickly, so shortly after being brought into captivity. So it's very likely that she was bred, unless she was held for a long period of time, which is generally not the case.
Yeah.
But that's been the case for all of the hybrids, with the exception of John Martin's 2 litters. He produced his in captivity, but the rest of them were born to gravid females.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I'm I don't think I would do hybrids myself, but I am fascinated and love them. I know there's a lot of hate and shade thrown on them. I love them. It's really freaking cool.
If it's naturally occurring, I've got no problem with them.
Right, exactly. It's like the what do they call it? Keiju python or what Daniel Solis calls them, the super Timor.
Timor
Timor and a Gempianus. I'm sure somewhere, maybe not all the way in, Jampea, Kalatoa, etc., but, Timors and Retics both being in the Malayo python family, that's got to happen in the wild.
If the range overlaps, there's certainly the potential for it. We see it naturally in various carpet pythons, between diamond pythons or between diamonds and carpets, we see it in the wild. So certainly, I would imagine if the range of Timors and Retics overlap, then it's likely that it does occur to some level.
Yeah.
And I've been sent pictures of Amazons in the past that look like hybrids that have been brought out of the wild. So I think it probably occurs, maybe at low frequency, but certainly I think it occurs.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's cool in the hobby, but it's, like Lucas and I have said on here before, it's a little scary with the Timor retic stuff, just because it can look so similar to some of the super stuff.
Once you get to 75% retic, 25% Timor, starts to look like super dwarf, and then people can start to there's already so much
once it changes the scamming hands twice,
right,
exactly. That is the problem. That is the problem, and I think
that's the problem.
Those Amazons, with the Amazon emerald, those that did reach adulthood, I think John Martin tried to breed them. He could never get them to reproduce. They would breed, but they would never produce anything.
Interesting.
That's pretty common with hybrids.
Yeah, it depends on the direction. So it's often directional. it's very often that the males will be sterile, but the females will have some level of fertility. You see that in Carpondras, for example.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting here because Dayton has a male and mine is a female. So I do plan, like, if she does reach adulthood, I will pair it to something. I don't know what, but in time, just to see if she can, if she does produce,
Yeah, you
But
have to.
other than that, she's just a cool pet. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I bought her not expecting her to survive very long, and just more of an interesting animal to see what would happen to it.
Just for that color change, it's been worth it.
Yeah,
Right.
because I didn't expect that.
Yeah, the blue
literally,
is so beautiful.
It was a little brown, kind of ugly snake. Whenever I got it, so it changed, and it changed amazingly. It turned red, and then I'm going to sit down at some point and go put those pictures together, because it was really kind of stunning the way it changed. I didn't expect blue to be the final color.
Yeah. Now you're one of the perfect guests to for Boas to go into this next question. Because of your background, and you have more than just the hobbyist knowledge. But an interesting thing that we've observed is how Madagascar is home to boas, but it's a break off of Africa, whereas Africa is home to pythons. Any thoughts, theories, ideas? How the hell did that happen?
Yeah, I'm not sure, but there are some boas on Africa, right? You got various sand boas.
Okay.
Right.
I wonder how closely related they are.
Yeah, what's really interesting about the boas on Madagascar is that they have a different sex chromosome system than the boas that we see in South America. So snakes in general were all thought to have ZW sex chromosomes, where the female is ZW and the male is ZZ. Right, so that's kind of the opposite of humans, right, or mammals, where the female is XX. Right, so therefore she can only produce one type of gamete. The male in humans determines the sex of the offspring. In boas and pythons, most of them, the female determines the sex of the offspring, whether she passes on a Z or a W sex chromosome, because the male can only pass on a Z, right? With boas and pythons, we find that they were all XXXY. It independently evolved that sex determination system between the two lineages, which is kind of cool. But the Madagascar boas are ZZZW. They're the ancestral kind of sex chromosome kind of configuration, which is unusual. Which is why, whenever I see a lot of people asking, can they cross their dumerals with their boa constrictor, the answer is no, because they don't have the same sex chromosomes.
Okay.
Wow.
But you can cross a Sanzinia to the dumerals. They're kind of a cool hybrid. But yeah, the Madagascar are just a totally different lineage. And I don't know enough about the formation of, the splitting of Africa, Madagascar, any links to South America and so on. And at some point I should really look into it, because I've got friends that study Madagascar herpetology pretty extensively. And I should meet up with them at some point again soon. I'll have to ask them about their thoughts on the evolution of Madagascar boas, but they're cool. I've got Eastern Sanzinia, so the green Sanzinia, and they're a really cool snake.
Yeah.
Again, an unusual one. You take it out of the enclosure, it curls up, it'll coil up like a ball python in your hand. It'll just sit there. It's kind of it's unusual.
Yeah, no, definitely not like a South American boa.
Not at all. No.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And I want to give a shout out to Riley. Riley kind of was the one, I reached out to him, and again, I had a hard time. Nathan had a hard time as well coming up with some questions. So I was talking to Riley about pop wins, and I was like, hey, by the way, we're having Warren Booth on. He's like, hey, ask him about this. And then when I added that in there, I was like, I'm going to wait for his answer, because I could have gone into a 50-hour rabbit hole on Google trying to see where the split off and that kind of stuff happened. But
are those the Sanzinia?
Yeah.
Yeah, those are so
and the cool thing is, they also go through they go through an ontogenic color change. So again, if you go way back into my Instagram, you'll find that as a baby, and it was bright red.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, what I love about them is they kind of have this their pattern and coloration is kind of viper like.
Yeah, their head shape too.
Yeah. And the heat pits they're really elongated heat pits. They're labial scales. They're really, really cool.
Yeah, no, they're beautiful.
And they're stupidly expensive. I think when I didn't pay anything for mine. But I think nowadays, I think that the last couple of pairs that sold for over 10,000 a pair.
I was gonna say, like, are they Boland's expensive? And it sounds like it. They're up
Yeah,
there.
they're close to it. Yeah, they're certainly. I think there's one. I think there's a male on Morph Market now for 7,500.
Yeah,
It's a sibling, I think, to one of mine.
man.
Yeah,
High-end super door for locality prices, Lucas.
yeah, that's it. And
Yeah,
yeah, but they're a cool snake. You know, I like them. It's I had them back in Ireland, but you can't export them because they're CITES 1. So whenever I moved to the US 18 years ago, I had to sell my group, which totally sucked. But it's weird because back in the UK and Ireland and Europe, they're not that expensive. You can pick them up for about £600 or £800 each.
Yeah, everything is more affordable over there, dude. Everything. Yeah. They're getting pure locality super doors over there for £300-400.
Little break off question, but when you were over in the UK, were you able to work with any of the German breeders? Because I know German herpetoculture is pretty like rampant.
So I know several. You know, people like Paul Harris from UK Pythons. He actually moved to Germany for a long time and bred his stuff there. And there's a number of people that I talk to a lot, and I've even exported stuff from Germany to here through some of my friends in Germany. But herpetoculture there is really, you know, it's a fascinating kind of hobby there because they go all out with. They have to have large enclosures. They have to have a very different way of keeping, but they also get their hands on some pretty interesting animals that somehow make their way out of countries where they shouldn't have got their way out of.
That's the most interesting part to me.
Yeah.
That's always been a big part of their culture.
I've known of some pretty rare animals that are not meant to exist in captivity, existing in German captivity. So, yeah, it's cool.
Cool. Well, jumping back on the rails, one of the main questions we have as far as differentiating the two most common types of boas is just BCC and BCI. Like I said in the intro, like I'm not sure what my super hypo was that I had years ago. Was he BCC? Was he BCI?
No,
what are the differences?
So that would have been a Boa Imperator. So a number of years ago, you know, we don't really have BCC and BCI and stuff anymore because
that's what I thought too. Yeah, that
there was a paper that I was part of. I think maybe 5 or 6 years ago by Darren Card that kind of really solidified the transition from subspecies to species level for Imperator, but also resurrecting the species Sigma. So Boa Sigma are the Mexican boas from the Pacific side. On the Gulf Coast side of Mexico, you got Boa Imperator, and it spreads all the way down through Central America into kind of Venezuela, Colombia, and so on. And then you get a transition. Anything east of the Andes are Boa Constrictor, mainly. You know, forget about the Colombia, you know, where you get Imperator, but that's where you get the Boa Constrictor. On the west of the Andes, they should be Imperator to an extent, but again, we need to do a little bit more sampling. But they are quite different.
Can you, for me, who again, like locality is my thing, and you know, with boas, I know localities, but I don't know. Can you give me some examples of BCCs and BCIs with localities?
Yeah, so Boa Imperator, think Nicaragua, Panama.
Okay. Typically smaller?
Colombia. No, because they go from Colombia, which are the Colombian boas, the big ones, right the way up. And you know, end of the islands, Crawl Cay, Lagoon Cay, West Snake Cay, Hog Island. They're all Boa Imperator.
Which one is like, I don't know if you said this and I missed it, but which one's like the true red tail? I hear that.
Well, they would be the Boa Constrictor. So
okay,
that's South American lineage, yeah. So
like Peruvian,
Guyana, Suriname.
Right?
Yeah, you'll get Peruvian, certain animals in Peru. You'll get Guyana, Suriname, Brazil. And they're the true constrictor. And they're different in that, you know, if you don't know boas, then it might be more difficult to kind of tell them apart. But once you've had them for a while, you can definitely tell them apart. They're very different. They're night and day. In fact, they've got elongated heads. Their bodies are slightly different shape. They can get bigger. You know, I've seen records of 13 and 14 feet.
Yeah, Surinams are supposed to. If I were to keep, a true red tail, it'd probably be a Suriname, just because they're absolutely stunning. It's a locality which is right up my alley, and they're big, which I like.
And they can be, they're not all. So I've got
cool.
I've got a group of Guyana constrictor, and they're probably 5.5 feet, 6 feet.
Oh, nice.
I'm sure they could probably get up to 8 feet or 9 feet. It depends on how you keep them. They're delicate in the sense that they can be like emeralds, where if they come in with the wrong parasite, they're regurging and they're going to go downhill on you.
They're done, yeah.
If you overfeed them, they're going to go downhill on you. So you can't grow them up like a Colombian boa. So they are a bit more delicate. They like to have slightly cooler temperatures, but they are fascinating snakes. They're harder to breed. They're on a different seasonal cycle than Boa imperator.
Okay.
Pretty neat.
One thing we wanted to highlight too was, are there any big behavioral differences? I don't know if it's just me, but I have a terrible time reading boas just in general. All of my bites, I feel like, besides just a couple from retics, have come from boas.
I found it interesting. We were having this conversation. I'm sorry, I was excited to mention this, but Nathan was telling me he had a hard time reading them, and my history of keeping them as a kid, growing up all the way until I was 18.
No, I had a hard time not getting bit just in random circumstances.
They were thinking I was opening totally their fine. Mouth. Like my Argentine boa, my one from the pet shop. Who knows what the hell it was? It was a red tail, but probably not a red tail. It like every single time I'd open up that enclosure, mouth open, hissing, very easy to read.
Yeah, so mine are. I don't think I've got any like that. Argentines, so they're Boa occidentalis.
Yeah, those are my favorite, to be honest.
Those as babies are like that, but as adults, they're the opposite. They're completely placid.
It never bit me. Never struck. Literally just open mouth hissing. I would hold it in the palm of my hands when it was a baby. Open mouth hissing. Never struck.
And if you like retics because of their size, occidentalis can get big.
Yeah.
I remember seeing occidentalis back in the UK that were pretty 10 feet.
And one thing I noted with just owning my boa for a handful of years was, I think he ended up getting around 6 feet, was just the power difference that they have compared to a retic. My retics are strong, but they grip onto you in a different way.
Mm-hmm. They are a different kind of body structure. They are, and it doesn't matter. Even the smaller ones, really have a way. They're pretty powerful snakes.
Yeah, they're dense. They take up room when you're holding them.
Yeah, and I've got Colombian boas, so I've got the various labyrinth and IMG and all of those. But I actually sent them down to a friend because he's more into Colombian boas. The the leucistics, stuff like that. There, I sent them over to my friend just because I like the stuff that's slightly smaller. All of the Central American animals that I have are kind of ranging between 3 feet and 5.5 feet.
Cool.
Which is more ideal for me. It keeps me as a happier individual. Yeah.
I got a question that wasn't, we didn't write this down to send over to you, but we're talking about smaller, stuff. And I want to ask it before we get into the pet trade of boas. There's people that I hear that refer to dwarf boas, like the Mexican boas. When
Hog Island, right?
Yeah, right. So that's where I want to ask this. So when I think of dwarfism, right, and I'm thinking it from a retic standpoint, I'm thinking of insular dwarfism, that they're breaking off, right? But it seems like with the Mexican boas that are considered dwarfs, Mexico's huge. So what's the actual factor there? Are they actually true dwarfs? Is it a different dwarf than insular dwarfism? What's contributing to these smaller sizes?
They're certainly smaller. Yeah, Boa sigma are definitely smaller. That's a species of boas that I've kept the longest. I've had them for 28 years.
Cool.
And I've always had Boa sigma. And my adult females normally peak out at about 5.5 feet at most. males normally 3.5 to 4 feet. I find that there's a lot of sexual dimorphism. You can go into other regions of Mexico and you can find them a lot smaller than that, especially on like the Sky Islands. You'll find them where they're 3 feet, 3.5 feet as adult. Do they have the potential to get bigger? Well, like anything, the more you feed it, the more it will grow. So Hog Islands, for example, they are a smaller lineage, but they're not necessarily a true dwarf, because whenever they started being brought into captivity in the 80s, in the late 80s, in the early 90s, when you saw the real numbers coming in, they went from being 4 feet animals to being 6.5 feet pretty quickly, because people were just feeding them the way they fed then. People had a tendency to overfeed, and these animals will just grow. My largest hog islands are probably about 5.5 feet, maybe even 6 feet.
Mm-hmm.
And I feed them once a month. They get a large rat once a month, so they're not being overfed, but they do have the potential to grow. Speaking to friends that have that collect and that work with hog islands on the islands, they say that they generally, the largest they normally find are about 4 feet,
Wow.
and that's just due to food availability. They said they will come across a female that's like 6 feet every now and again, but she'll be the thickness of a broomstick. So there's not the
She found a good
available
spot.
food.
She found a good spot.
There's not the available food to kind of sustain them to be able to grow bigger, and at that point they're reproductively dead. They're not finding reproductive animals past about 4 feet.
Wow.
So in captivity, however, where we have an abundance of food, you can get them to grow bigger. Same as the islands, you look at the Cockers Cay, the Crawl Cay, Lagoon Cay. They're tiny little boas on the island because they feed maybe for 6 weeks on migratory birds, and then they don't feed for the rest of the year. So they gorge for a very short period of time, but there's just not a lot of food there, period, and it's not big. In captivity, you see them, if you feed them like a regular boa, every 2 weeks, then you're going to see a bigger boa.
Yeah. A lot of the super dwarf people don't like me because I make statements that, we don't know if they're true or not, but we're reversing the insular dwarfism with the retics.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. A lot of people don't like that, but in 10 years, we're going to start to see, in 10 years, and then we raise up 10-year-old Kalatoas, they're going to be 12 feet.
Yeah. Depending on what way we feed them, I food cycle mine religiously. So for 4 months of the year, my animals don't get food.
Oh, my retic would kill me.
Right. But this past year, it was even more, because between January and July, whenever my animals were at my friend's house, they got fed maybe 3 times. I still had 4 reproduce, which is kind of crazy. But I then brought them up here once my room was finished, and I fed them really heavily, more than I would feed anything normally. I fed them every 7 days to 10 days. The weight gain was astronomical. Within a month, you wouldn't know that these animals hadn't fed in 6 or 8 months.
Huh.
And it was actually longer than that, because it would have been from November through to July. So that was the period of time where they had maybe 2 or 3 meals. They also grew substantially. So I've got animals that were 4 feet that are now 5 and a bit feet. And so within a 5-month period of 4, because I fed heavily from July through to November 1st and then stopped feeding them. In that time period, they put on a lot of weight and they put on length. So they have the ability to really ramp it up whenever they need to. And if people don't give them that 4 months fasting period, then they're just going to keep putting on weight. Snakes there's no preconceived kind of like we grow to 4.5 feet and that's it.
And then stop. Yeah.
They will grow. Yeah, they will continue to grow until they die. And if you feed them in such a way that permits continual growth, then you're going to see a much larger snake.
Yeah, they might die at 10 years old, but
absolutely, yeah, very likely, yeah. But they can be big before they get there.
It's validating you said that, because I haven't really shared this with anybody, not because I don't want to, but I observed. I do temperature and food cycling with my retics, and my Kaiwati for her first clutch 2 seasons ago, she was about 8 feet at like 4.5, 5 years old, and I give them a fasting period for about 2 months where I'll feed them I'll feed them 1 or 2 small meals. And then when I started ramping her up to cycle, she decided that she went off of food, but like she was not giving off pheromones to, the male was not interested. None of my males were interested. And so, but in that time frame of like 3 months of heavy feeding, she's now probably close to 9 feet.
Yeah, you know,
Yeah,
and
she grew astronomically, and I'm, because of that, I'm here just like she's getting a meal once a month.
yeah, and it's amazing because, this year, putting animals together for breeding, I've got in the last month, I've had 8 ovulations, and I've got just think about there's one that's building right now, the 2 that are building, and 2 which are Boa Sigma that are a little bit delayed because that's the way Sigma are. So I've probably got another 4, maybe 5 that will ovulate. But it's amazing, and I was just talking to someone recently that the question is, did that real heavy period of not feeding, followed by that period of kind of just gluttony, really trigger that follicular maturation? I think that's what happened.
I like it a lot.
I'm not. Yeah, I'm not recommending you starve your snakes for 9 months or 8 months, or feed them on a true maintenance plan like that I did.
Yeah.
But it's amazing that how, as I say, how fast they put the weight back on again, but how they have turned that both into growth and also now into egg development. I've been shocked. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Pretty amazing.
Garrett Hartle shared that trick with me, and it works like a charm. You minimally feed them for 2.5 months, and then you start hitting them with food, and they're off food within a month.
Yeah, I've got the female is building, or the 2 females that are building to ovulation right now. I'll remove the males. I'm going away to Knoxville tomorrow, and I'll get back on Thursday night. I will hit them with those females with large rats, larger than I would normally feed them, maybe jumbo rats or whatever, and I can guarantee that will push the ovulation over the edge. And then that means I've only got 2 animals, maybe 3 that are left to go.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
Yeah. Food cycling is, there's a lot of snakes require different triggers, whether it could be light, humidity, temperature, or food. Some of them require more than others, but food is often a real key driver. That once they go into that fasting period and then into that period of heavy feeding, that's generally enough to kick them over into production.
Yeah,
especially for species that are from climates where they don't go through significant temperature cycling, right?
Yeah.
So Central America, South America,
where it's like a rainy and a dry season almost, kind of. Yeah.
Anything near the equator, I'd assume, right?
Yeah, that's what I always figured with retics in the wild is they go through a rainy and dry season. They breed during the rainy season. That's typically when there's a surplus of food.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's it. And I think it's the food is the real thing, because when you look at the rainy and the dry season, it's once that rainy season kicks in, you really see the abundance of food again. And, so that's just, for most cases, you're knocking out the one level of cycling, which could be the humidity. And you're changing that just for that food. So they're into that, right? It's time to eat and it's time to reproduce.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
So, I mean, we're a retic podcast, but, a lot of our listeners don't necessarily own retics. So in the retic world, a lot of the times you hear, get a boa before you get a retic. Some of us, I mean, especially me in the super dwarf world where I'm working with pretty small bloodlines, I might not agree with that statement, but do you think that starting with a boa is maybe a good step into owning a larger animal like a mainland reticulated python?
No, I don't think so. I think they're very different animals. I think they're night and day different. I think, you'll be more sensible getting a coastal carpet python, something that's going to behave. It's going to be similarly arboreal if it wants to be. It's going to have a very similar body structure, similar attitude in some cases.
Like
I said, I couldn't read boas to save my life, so I think that's a fair statement.
Yeah, boas and I love retics. I'd really like to get some of the super dwarfs in time, but I think they're fascinating animals, but I think they're night and day different than a boa. It's like years ago, people used to say, get an Amazon Tribo before you get an emerald.
Sure.
Amazons and emeralds are night and day different. An Amazon an Amazon's like a corn snake that likes to bite you a lot more. An emerald just sits on a branch. Totally different.
It's like it's comparing like a Michael Phelps to a Shaquille O'Neal type of thing, and I'm not talking about size difference, but like just activity level type
totally
of thing.
That's the one case where you might go python before boa with like green tree pythons.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean,
Lucas.
my understanding, which is limited, and this probably stems from the import days. Both were a nightmare, chondros versus emerald tree boas, but the emerald tree boa and the regurgitation and the difficulty with establishing and all that stuff. I was always told if you're going to get into tree snakes, you start with a chondro and work your way into emerald tree boas.
Oh, really? Yeah, I think they're, wild-caught chondros have got their own set of issues. Wild-caught emeralds have got their own set of issues, I think chondros in general are a little bit more delicate as babies. You see prolapsing here and there. I don't see that. I've never seen that in emeralds. And I find emerald babies really easy to get established. They look very similar, but again, they're night and day different. I think if you're looking to get a retic, you get some other python, an Indonesian python. I think it's going to be a better.
Don't get Apodora, but.
No, that would be the wrong thing to do.
Yeah, that'd be the wrong thing
when you talk about muscular snakes, but also the Apodora that I've worked with over the years, all they want to do is climb. So you take out this, 8 foot long, really muscular snake that just wants to go right up. I think a retic might be an easier. Maybe the retic is the learning curve for the Apodora.
I've always been on the boat of. Get what you want, just do enough research and understanding, right? Like, I don't like the idea of don't buy a snake you don't want to get a snake you do want, because you're typically not going to, some people will give that snake a good home. But yeah, I've always heard just like, people are always like, I'm interested in getting a retic, but, I'm concerned about that. And everybody's go-to is always like, start with a boa. And I'm like,
really? Yeah. No,
that was my thought.
Snakes are not bicycles. We don't need training wheels.
Right.
You
just got to learn about them.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. In my personal experience, that did me no good into getting into retics. Besides, having a slightly larger snake, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Right, but yeah, I think it's very rare that a snake is going to prepare you for a completely different species snake.
Right.
In any circumstance.
No.
Yeah, and I don't think a super dwarf would be a good animal to get if you want to get experience before you get a really big retic.
No,
because they're totally different as well.
Yeah. The difference between even my 9 foot and my 10 foot females is insane.
Yeah, and even activity level, and when you look at I don't know, I think of mainland, especially with how much they've been inbred and stuff like that. They're so much more mellow, for the most part. And I'm not saying that super dwarfs and dwarfs are not mellow, like they absolutely can be. But, when you see like the cute videos of like people scratching their retics' chins and things like that, you typically see them with big, mainland animals. And and one thing that I've noticed is, I've had a couple mainlands, when I'm handling them, they don't go up. My super dwarfs are always on my head.
Yeah, it kind of shows you how arboreal they are.
Yeah.
In the wild. It's the same as, if we go back to boas, a lot of these little island boas, they're all arboreal.
Yeah.
They're not, and even hog islands, talking again to friends that have been there frequently and working on hog island boas, in the wild, they say that, 4 out of 5 they find in the trees.
Right. Yeah, that's pretty cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So maybe not the perfect bicycle into retics, but do you think they're a decent beginner large species for just the general reptile enthusiast?
Oh yeah, like if you want to get a snake that has the potential to get to 7 or 8 feet and pretty girthy, then yeah, absolutely. I think a Colombian boa imperator, I think, is a great snake. I wouldn't recommend a Boa Constrictor, the true red tails, because they're a little bit more work. But certainly, if you just want a big snake, but not one that's gonna, eat your cat and your children, and I think a Colombian Boa imperator is great. But also
Okay.
the thing I really like about boas and that whole kind of boa constrictor group is that you can go from a 3 foot adult to a 13 foot adult. There's a range localities across that locality, across the species range. There's one to suit everybody. And the reason I got into Boa Sigma early on was because of their size. I like the idea that you can have a boa that's kind of that size, 3 feet, 4 feet, slender, and it's not gonna, it doesn't require rabbits.
Right.
You can feed it. My adult male Boa Sigma normally get at most a small rat.
Yeah.
Once a month or once every 6 weeks.
Well, and briefly before we started recording, we were talking about the bromeliad boas, and I mean, you can get stuff, as
tiny,
small as a little worm.
It's
up
crazy.
up to that 13-foot mark.
And what's cool about boas too is if you want a boa that you'll never see, you can get a sand boa.
Right.
Like you can get you can get a snake that looks like you have an empty.
If you want a
empty
Zen
terrarium.
garden, you can get a sand boa.
Sand boa or a rosy boa, even a rubber boa. Those things are tiny.
Oh yeah, we can find those in my backyard.
Yeah,
rubber boas.
really?
That's cool. Yeah,
that's pretty cool. Yeah, no,
I haven't yet. That's the one species I haven't found here, and I'm really wanting to.
Dude, I've lived here in Texas for 8 years now in March. Actually, yeah, just past 8 years yesterday, and I have yet to see a freaking rattlesnake.
Oh, I've seen plenty of those.
Go figure. I've seen a handful of Texas coral snakes eating other snakes.
Cool.
Have yet to see a freaking rattlesnake here, man. I don't think they exist.
Just go out to New Mexico. Go out to Bob Ashley is a friend of mine. He runs the NARBC shows, and he's got a place called the Chiricahua Desert Museum out in Rodeo, New Mexico. It's right off Portal Road. In fact, if you walk across the street, you're into Arizona, which screws you up because you then change time zone.
Right, like literally in a step.
It's literally
that sounds closer to me than it is Lucas.
Yeah, but you go from Bob's, the museum, and you drive up Portal Road to his house, 2 miles, and you'll see rattlesnakes on the road every evening.
Yeah.
You go to some of the buildings near the museum. You don't want to walk around there at night because there's a lot of rattlesnakes and a lot of hybrid rattlesnakes as well.
I believe I've seen videos of his facility from like Dave Kaufman and others before.
Quite possibly, yeah. He, from what I know, he reduced the number that he had of rattlesnakes. So he had a very large collection, just amazing animals. And I think he reduced the collection size down quite a bit, but he still maintains a pretty decent group of animals. And the museum is spectacular. If you ever get a chance to go out there, it's a lot of it's not huge, but there's a lot of really cool things in it.
Yeah. Nice. So we've talked about different type of boas that you could get, even outside the BCC and BCI, and any like, can you give us like a top 3? So like, I know BCCs, BCIs, whatever they're called now, they what's really cool about them is like the morph craze and everything. But for someone who's not, about that, can you give like your top 3 pet boas?
So, I suppose I could rank it by size. I think Suriname and Guyana boas can be really good because there's only one morph, and there's been an albino found a handful of times, right? So if you just want a locality animal, then they're great.
You really like that with the thumbs up popping up in the video.
I didn't even see that.
It's an animation that pops up. It happens with me too. I was moving my microphone and it popped up at some point earlier.
Yeah, I see that. I think if you like something that's going to be a morph, if you want an albino or something like that, I think that just the Colombian boas are great. They get to, they can peak out at 6 feet, or you can see one at 8 or 9 feet. So you can really, choose what you want. If you get a female, they're likely to be larger. So if you want that larger snake, it tends to be super placid, really predictable. I think they're a great snake as well. But if you want something smaller, then any of the island locality boas, even the Boa Sigma, the Mexican boas can be really tiny. So I think you've got a whole range depending on what you want. I think it's hard to beat a Colombian boa, even though the ones that I've got are all at my friend's place because they're too big for my house. But I think they're fantastic snakes. I think it's hard for me to say, to pick a top 3, but I can. my top three would be Sonoran boas, because that's what I started with and I love them. Hog Island boas, because their color is just remarkable.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to start with.
Yeah, Hog Islands are fantastic, and I've got a bunch of them here, and I really, really like those. And then I like the Costa Rican boas
Nice.
because I got the cool albinos, but even just the wild form of those, they've got this really cool slate gray kind of along the lateral sides. The top's slightly different color, more golden. Just a really neat snake,
Yeah.
So there's just so much variety. What I like is totally different to what you guys might like, and so on.
Yeah. Oh, you know what? We haven't even touched on it here. We won't even get into it. We'll just do like a whole separate species spotlight down the road with someone who works with them. But Dominican mountain boas, those are beautiful as well. And
they're great, and they're highly variable. Yeah, they're super highly variable. And realistically, we've only been seeing those in captivity in the last 10 years. To any kind of numbers. The issue with them, of course, is that the babies tend to be lizard feeders. But they transition, I believe, pretty quickly under rodents. And sometimes you get these ones that are just flaming red, bright fire engine red, and they look amazing. And you get other ones that are kind of more dull, more brown. But again, depending on what color you want, there's a whole range of those. They're really cool. I actually saw a picture of an albino one a couple of weeks ago that was caught.
Whoa!
So that's kind of really cool. It was found in a bird feeder.
That's pretty awesome. Found in a bird feeder.
Yeah.
Man, these animals know how to survive. I love it.
I know. That's it.
It's amazing. So if you can, as we start to wrap up, just kind of the general information on boas before we go into husbandry and keeping, we got a few more questions, but if you can, like, let's say compared to pythons and other common, pet snakes, let's talk about their immune systems. Are they complicated to keep healthy? Do they get sick easily? What's the deal? Like, humidity is, everyone talks about humidity. And like, I can even say with chondros, like, I think the humidity is overhyped. So I'm curious, like, what's their overall immune system? Are they fairly easy to keep and keep well, or?
I've never had a problem. And I keep probably about, 70 or 8, maybe 80 boas, as in Boa Imperator, Boa Sigma, or Boa Constrictor. The Boa Constrictor, the true red tails, require higher humidity. But you can get away with that by just putting in a humid hide. It's like a rainbow boa. For my Brazilian rainbow boas, my Colombian rainbow boas, I just put in a hide box that's full of damp sphagnum moss. And when they need the humidity, they go into it. They're shedding, for example. And I make sure they've got fresh water.
Regulate just like temperature.
Yeah, absolutely. And they do fine. The Mexican boas and the Central Americans that I keep, and the Hog Islands, my maintenance is really simple. It's 84 degrees ambient, fresh water every couple of days, and that's it. And if I see they have a bad shed, I'll mist them pretty heavily, or I'll put in a humid hide for them. But we go from here in Virginia, so we're closer to the mountains. We're about 2,000 feet elevation. We've gone from, I don't know what the humidity is in the summer, but I don't have any shedding issues in the summer, but I have some shedding issues in the winter, because there goes my thumb. That's the one. I think it's just whenever you turn on, the air conditioning, the furnace or so on, it dries out the air a little bit. So this year I'm gonna play with a room humidifier for a little bit in the winter, but I've never had any problems in terms of health. I've never had a boa in the hundreds and hundreds that I've produced. I've never seen one produce like come down with an RI.
Wow.
I've never had an issue awesome. in those kind of sense. Yeah. So they seem to be, they're pretty robust.
Good. I don't really see too many common health issues other than one that we're going to, maybe it's not that common, but, just real quick, you talked about humidifiers and everything. Just kind of like a word to people listening. Now that I keep my snakes in my garage, but even if you don't and you have it in your room, like, it's a staple. I have on one end, I have a humidifier, on the other end, a dehumidifier. And year round, I have my humidifier set to 60. When it goes below that, it kicks on. When it goes above 65, the dehumidifier kicks on, and it just makes it a nice, even 65%, during the breeding season, I'll turn off the dehumidifier. I'll let it get up to 80 sometimes, right? Especially at night when I'll do temperature dropping, I still like it to be humid. But it's such a nice tool to have. So if any of you are considering it, here's my pitch, get a humidifier.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the dehumidifier is a great idea as well, because the risk of having a room humidifier is that you then develop mold in your room if you let it get too high for too long.
Yeah.
So having that dehumidifier is also a pretty good thing.
I use the ones that don't emit vapor.
Oh, okay.
They're a little fancy, and you don't have to go that route. And I got some cheaper ones before, and I finally, after 3 or 4 of them, just kind of shit the bed. I was like, I spent the money this year on it's like a $500 one on Amazon, and it is freaking bulletproof. It's phenomenal, well worth the money. But yeah, it doesn't actually emit any vapor, which is pretty cool. I've never felt moisture on the walls, and that's the only type of humidifier I've ever ran.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. The only other thing that I run is I just have a large air purifier in my room as well.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea.
I think that's pretty important.
Dude, yeah. I use the Molecule, and let me tell you, man, when I would feed my hatchlings, I'd feed them in the afternoon, and then I would, the next morning, if I went into my garage and they didn't eat it, I could already start to smell it.
Right.
When I first got my Molecule, I didn't smell. My nose was like my no. It made me know to look through the rack system. When I first got my Molecule, dude, I didn't smell anything the day after.
Say it one more time. They don't pay us, Lucas.
Whatever. We'll reach out to them. But yeah, it was 3 days later when I went to go do fresh water changes. There's a few that didn't eat their rat. Yeah. I felt horrible, but man, this freaking air purifier, I don't want to say it.
I don't think they're going to want to work with us after hearing what they're purifying.
Yeah, but I mean, and I know it's disgusting. I'm not proud of it, right? But after that, I check. It's a ritual now. I'll just check the next morning every single time. But man, 3 days and I didn't smell decaying rat is mind blowing.
Oh God.
I think
that's concerning.
They're an essential. Yeah, I think they're an essential part of any snake room.
Yeah. Yeah. But I will say, Molecule claims to kill COVID. Shut up. No, just stop it.
As long as it kills rat smell.
Right. That's as long as they do that. Right. And especially with retics and the volumes they piss and shit.
Well, speaking of COVID, let's talk the COVID of Boas, IBD.
It's
good segue.
Excellent. Very, very good. That is, I don't know how much of it is hyped. I don't know how much of it is misdiagnosed. There's a lot of different things can cause IBD-like syndrome or symptoms, where they're stargazing, where they'll, develop RI, where they'll, have trouble righting themselves and so on. There could be a bunch of different things from temperature spikes causing kind of brain injuries to bacterial infection. So I think the problem is that for a period of time, people would see a stargazing boa and instantly think IBD, and that's not necessarily the case. A few years ago, the Boa genome was published. It's not a wonderful genome, but it's a genome. But that wasn't the reason they did that study. They didn't set out to identify the genome of the boa. They went to identify the causative agent of IBD, because the snake that they sequenced the genome from had IBD. So they had to sequence the boa genome to get that out of the way so they could eliminate that from the sample, so they knew that everything else was going to be not boa related. And that's how they identified kind of the adenovirus that was associated with inclusion body disease. The problem with that also is that there's a lot of those adenoviruses. So being able to identify one that is definitely a causative agent of IBD is tricky. And just like we mentioned earlier on with Parth Genesis or with cancers, because they've got a virus for it, doesn't mean that they're going to exhibit symptoms.
Right.
So, it's almost like nidovirus,
or like mononucleosis in humans.
Right. Nidovirus scares the life out of many people, and I've seen people, euthanize their entire collections because they've had nidovirus. I think that's extreme because there's a lot of nidoviruses that are found that are not going to affect the snake. And even if they got it, doesn't mean that they're going to pass. They won't pass it on to their offspring through eggs. We don't know a lot about IBD in terms of how that's passed on to offspring from parent to offspring. And you know, we see animals that are asymptomatic their entire life, and yet they will test positive for adenovirus. So it was a major thing in Europe. A lot of people started testing and providing paperwork to say that their animals were adenovirus free and so on, or a renovirus, not adenovirus. And I think that caught on a little bit here in the US, but I haven't seen it as much lately. Yeah. I think it's overhyped personally.
You know, and I kind of feel the same way with nidovirus and pythons. You know, but I also know that, you know, I know that a lot of farms out in Indonesia with condos are struggling with it. And that's why there's been a pretty big halt in importing them. But yeah, I do think that we have the tendency to become hyperfixated or hyper paranoid on a lot of these things. As a matter of fact, we have a great Patreon member that is just so anal about everything because of the fear of IBD or of
right.
You know, any, you know, and they're taking like drastic measures that like, you know, good for them too. And their collection's manageable and they're able to do that. And I also feel that like, if we cater too much to keeping things too sterile, we can actually weaken their immune systems.
Absolutely. Yeah. You know, I think the other thing is that arenovirus for IBD is not necessarily fatal to boas. They can be asymptomatic for years, for their entire life. Pythons seem to be different. If pythons get IBD, it kills them within a matter of weeks. So if you're really paranoid, so if you're really paranoid, get a couple of canaries, you know, pythons for your boa collection,
right?
And you'll soon find out. So in my snake room, among all the boas, I've got a whole bunch of Antaresia. So a bunch of the spotteds and the children's pythons. I've got Dunn's pythons. I've got caramel Sumatran shorttails, and they've never exhibited any symptoms. So I'm pretty. And I used to have about 70 ball pythons whenever I was young and stupid, and there's I've never had a problem with them. So.
Were you just young and stupid, or were you stupid because of the ball python keeping? Or
I think it was probably the latter. Yeah, and I stupidly did it. I stupidly did it twice.
Yeah, it's. I mean, it's when you get into the hype, man. I'm sure it's addicting.
Yeah, I think is that I'm probably unique among the ball python people in that I actually like ball pythons.
Right, like just the normal types.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, I like them. I think they're kind of cool. I don't have them anymore, and I doubt I will ever have one again. But everybody can produce them. You can throw them into a wet paper bag and they'll breed. But
we need to have a ball python on, like, for the defense for all of our species spotlights, because I feel like there's always an uppercut at ball pythons at some point.
Yeah, I like them.
I respect them.
I wish people would just also enjoy normal ball pythons as well.
Right.
Right. But yeah, so I think IBD, it is very real. But as I say, I think there's a lot of other issues that can cause similar symptoms.
Yeah.
And like nidovirus, because it has it doesn't mean it's going to kill it or even show any symptoms. So you got to take it on a case by case scenario.
Yeah, it's definitely, what I'm hearing is that it's not something that you should be like, don't get a boa because you're scared of IBD.
Oh no, yeah, not at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, not at all. And if you've got boas, you shouldn't need to run out and start testing them all for these arenoviruses.
Yeah.
I don't think that's necessary either. I think if you've got a reason to, then that's fine. But if you don't have a reason to, then I don't think there's any need to.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Let's segue into, so we just like did a big deep dive into boas, and now people listening are like, all right, a boa's right for me. Can you give us, and I know that like it's going to vary, right? So you can even be species specific with what you keep, but can you give us what an idea of their husbandry parameters look like? So let's just jump into what you tell people that are buying a snake on how to keep it. You know, this is cage size, keeping them happy, healthy for a long term. Let's just jump into, everyone knows what we're talking about with general husbandry basics. So let's jump into that.
Yeah, so it varies across the species and across the range. So if we're looking at something like the Mexican boas, the Boa Sigma, they tend to be smaller. So like a 4-foot enclosure tends to be, kind of, they live very happily in a 4-foot enclosure. I keep mine in the Freedom Breeder FB 90s, are they? The wide kind of, they're not the full length things, but they're wider than the CB70. They're deeper and stuff like that there. I keep my males in CB70s. I keep my females in the FB 90s or whatever.
Okay.
They do really well. I used to keep them in 4-foot by 2-foot enclosures. They did really well on those. When you move into the larger, like the Imperator, the Colombian Imperator, then bigger enclosures are better. I think you should have a 5 or a 6-foot enclosure for those, just because they're larger bodied.
Yeah.
And I think they do need the space to be able to move around and to stretch. And then if you're going into the true red tails, again, I think your 5-6-foot enclosures, because they have the potential to get big, and even bigger if you've got a female that gets up to that 9 or 10 feet, then you might want to think about an 8-foot long enclosure, just to give them, because they will move. They're not slugs. They don't sit there like blood pythons, right? They are active.
Right.
Then you can go to something like the island boas, some of these little kind of Coral Cay, Lagoon Cay, West Snake Cay. You can put those in arboreal enclosures because they will climb. So you can keep them. You can keep males, for example, in those kind of Exoterra or Zoomed type arboreal enclosures, and they'll do great in those. Give them lots of branches, and they'll spend most of their time in the trees, which is kind of cool. Temperature-wise, it's pretty much all. So I keep all of mine, whether it's a Guyana red tail, or a Costa Rican Imperator, or a Mexican Boa Sigma. I keep them all with an ambient day temperature of 84 degrees. So they've got a basking spot maybe at like 88, 89.
Good to
so
know.
they're about 84. And at the other end of their enclosure, at the cooler end, it'll be sitting at about 78 to 80, somewhere around there. So they've got a range that they'll move in between. In the winter, I drop them down, their nighttime temperatures down to 72. And I'll find they still have that daytime hotspot. But their nighttime gets down so that the cool end gets to 72, not the ambient temperature. And what I'll find is that the animals at that point in time all move to the cool end, and they'll stay in that cool end pretty much through the entire kind of non-feeding period. So they're experiencing those nightly drops down to the low 70s. And I think that the Mexican boas in particular need those cooler temperatures. They're in the northern part of the range where it does get cold at night. And I think that does benefit them for follicular development and for sperm development. So, they spend most of their time there, and once the temperatures start warming up, they start moving back to the heat. And humidity-wise, we talked about humidity. I have never measured the humidity in my room. If I think it's getting a bit dry, I'll mist them a little bit, or I'll put in a humid hide. But I've never really had to worry too much about that.
Nice. Now, I'm curious. I'm not plugged into the Boa community, but we see very often the Retic community, and I think with Retics, rightfully so, right? We see a very big discussion about, the inhumane keeping of these large animals and vision cages, and, all these different, there's so much more to enrichment and husbandry than just the size of the enclosure. But at the end of the day, there are some very large snakes and smaller enclosures. And, we see a lot of the new people that have been coming into the hobby for retics that weren't in before because they're coming in with the Superdorf in mind. And so it's pushing this wave of keepers and breeders starting to change the way that they're keeping the retics and giving them much larger enclosures because they are semi-arboreal. Though, you give them, even Scott Sievers that we've had on before, he has these massive naturalistic enclosures for his mainlands, and they're on the branches more than they are on the floor. Do you see that shift happening in boas? I think my ignorance with boas is I think that in my mind before this episode, they were fairly large, but now learning a little bit more about them, and a lot of them are in the 3 to 4 foot range, it makes more sense why breeders specifically are keeping them in rack systems, but is there anything going on in the boa community that this transition's happening with, like, I don't know, the naturalistic or bio-natural or bioactive? Are breeders being like attacked like they are in the Retic community as far as, how people are keeping them?
Yeah, that's a good question. Certainly in Europe, you see those larger enclosures. It could be 4 or 5 feet long, 2 feet deep, 2 feet high, and they put shelves and branches, and the animals use those. You will use those space if you provide it. Um, Most people that I know that are breeding kind of Colombian boas or Central American boas are using rack systems, or they're using 4 foot or 3 foot enclosures that are, the foot high, 12 inches high or 18 inches high kind of thing. There seems to be two camps: those that use the cages and those that use the racks, and they both seem to do pretty well. Um, I think I've seen more of a movement of people that have these little small island locality boas that they'll use arboreal enclosures. They seem to do well with them. I've talked to people that have had Corn Island boas, for example, and they continually have issues with them rubbing their noses when they're in racks. But when you put them in arboreal enclosures, they don't anymore, and they're just always around the branches. So again, I think it depends on the locality, it depends on the species. But I think you are seeing, bioactive doesn't work for a boa constrictor. It would never work it wouldn't work for a retic. Right, and naturalistic enclosure is fine, but bioactive, there's not enough of a cleanup crew that's going to be able to clean up, what a boa constrictor does, in its enclosure, or to devour an 8-foot shed. It's just going to look like a mess. And I don't think that bioactive for most people really is bioactive.
No, I agree.
I think it's actually quite bacterially detrimental, because of the bacterial loads that are building up in them and so on. But I think you can definitely put together a nice naturalistic enclosure. I even do that in racks for many of mine. For my Duns pythons, they're in CB70s at the moment. And if you open it up, they're on cocoa fiber, but there are branches, there are hide boxes, there's fake plants and so on. So they can be, there's a huge amount of enrichment for them. You can do the same thing in a rack with a regular boa. You can put a bunch of corrugated tubing and so on. They'll find those like burrows. They'll use them. You can use a deeper substrate. I've been using shredded aspen on my snakes for the last 6 months, and they've been just burying deep into it and so on. So I think there's certainly ways that you can use a rack system and still have them in an enclosure where they're getting a lot of enrichment. But I'm not seeing the move for where people are starting to switch over to getting massive enclosures for their boas. Maybe if you're an individual with 1 or 2, that's fine. But if you've got any more than that, it can be difficult for people. But I suppose then again, there does seem to be a movement of many people just wanting to move to cages because they get to see their snakes.
Yeah, people
they want to walk into a room and
appreciate the animal a little bit more, and that's a nice shift to see.
Absolutely, yeah, that's great. And I think that's really been pushed by the colubrid people, and I think it's now spilling over into those with boas and pythons, so they can actually walk into a room and not see a bunch of drawers sitting in front of them, but they actually see animals doing things. Yeah.
Well, getting into some of our Patreon questions, we have a few Patreons that wanted to chime in tonight. Alessa is asking, what are some slept-on species? So some lesser known or kept species that should or could be more popular in the reptile hobby.
For boas, do you mean?
Yeah.
There's a handful that are really neat. There's like the Boa Imperator, the Sabugai. They're a natural island. They're an island form that is naturally super hypomelanistic, and they're small. They're really cool little boas, and there's not a lot of them being produced, and they're not that expensive. The ones that you find are probably about $500. They're not crazy, expensive. Nice. The Boa Longicauda are really cool. So they're found west of the Andes, and they are a really interesting snake because they're small, maybe about 5 feet, generally as adults, but they're naturally hypermelanistic, so they darken up really incredibly well. So they start off, they're night and day from baby to adult. Really, really pretty snakes. And I think that for me, they're the two that really are kind of the species that are slept on. I think we need to see. I would like to see more of those, being produced. And same thing with the Argentine boas, the Boa occidentalis. People think that
I agree.
they avoid them because they think about them being really big. But my friend Keith McPeak has got a female that he said is about 6.5 feet, and she
Wow.
produced a litter of like 25 babies this year. They don't need to be big as well. Right? You can push them to be bigger, but you can also maintain them where they're smaller. I think that's a species that's also been slept on because and there's some interesting morphs for those as well if that's what you want. There's a cool T positive albino. There's a motley form. So there are some interesting animals from those. I think they're the three that I would, and in terms of the kind of boa constrictor group, they're the three that I would like to see more of. And there's a couple that we just don't see anymore. We don't see Boa nebulosa, which are found on Dominica. We don't see Boa arophius, which is found on St. Lucia. They were two really interesting animals, just behaviorally very different, phenotypically very different, but no longer in captivity. I know of one pair of nebulosa in the US.
Wow.
And I don't know of any arophius. And it's pretty sad to see that kind of group, those species being lost because they were really cool.
All these different localities is not good for me.
You're
You're up my alley right now, man.
You can get, you can literally
Hundreds.
say, and it's just like the retics, with the dwarf and the super dwarf. There's so many localities that you can say, right, I want one that's going to be kind of this color and this pattern and this size, and you can just look through the map and you can find the ones that you want. It's pretty amazing. And if color morphs are your thing, then Boa Imperator's got a whole ton of color morphs. The thing is,
some of the most beautiful snakes I've laid eyes on have been boas.
Absolutely, and I've seen for a period of time. The reason I acquired so many, kind of ball pythons, and at the time some of them were pretty high end, was because these people wanted to get into boas, and they were trading me for ball pythons for boas. And then they got out of them pretty quickly because they couldn't breed them the same way that they breed ball pythons. They're not, you can't raise them up to adulthood in 18 months, and you can't.
Yeah,
they're a different system, and I don't think they like that. But boas are incredibly diverse. So there's something for everybody.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate that about any given species. Now, next Patreon question is from Scott. He said, I've heard that boa imperators make better pets than boa constrictors. Even comparing captive bred to captive bred, is there really a significant difference in temperament?
I have seen it. My Guyana red tails are predictable in that they will strike at you. They are not. They're kind of assholes. They're super pretty, but they're kind of assholes. But I've got a lot of animals that I've got because there's not a lot being produced in captivity, and I think we need to fix that. Boa Imperator, you talked about mainland retics all being very predictable now, very different than what they were 15, 20 years ago whenever you just saw imports coming in. Mainland, kind of the Boa Imperator, the Colombians, super predictable, docile animals, so very different than the Boa Constrictor. They are more likely to be less predictable, more likely to be a little bit snappy. From what I've seen, of course, there are some that are fantastic, but you get that with everything, right? You'll get Imperator that are assholes. You get Imperator that are fantastic. You get the same thing with Constrictor, but I've certainly seen Imperator being more placid and more predictable, a better pet if you want something to handle.
Right. We were originally going to go into a deep dive on breeding and talk about that, but we talked about that a lot earlier. So we're just going to, we talked about the temperature cycling and food cycling, all that good stuff. So, we're going to get into our wrap up questions here. I'm going to let Nathan take us away with his.
Sure.
Yeah. So, and this kind of goes into the breeding stuff, but I know that emeralds are notoriously hard to breed. What was one of your biggest hurdles in, pairing them for the first time?
I don't think they're hard to breed at all.
Oh,
I think I felt like I knew that was the answer.
I think once you got healthy animals, once you got healthy animals that are sufficient body weight, and again, you food cycle them, then then it's what you want. You want to have a compatible pair. So I've got a pair of anaconda phase together at the moment, and they're sitting in different ends of the enclosure. If that male doesn't show any activity in the next couple of weeks, I'll remove him and put him in with a different anaconda phase female. If he doesn't breed that well, it looks like I'll be buying some more anaconda phase males this year. You get some males that aren't great breeders, you get some that are, and you get some that trigger and switch on later than others.
Yeah.
But I think, in my opinion, if you got healthy animals that are maintained, so I think people keep them too cold. I keep my ambient in my emeralds enclosures are 85, 84, 85. They get a basking spot. They'll bask right up into the 90s. I've temp gunned some of mine at 95 basking, while after eating meals.
It's amazing.
But I think if you provide a temperature gradient for them where they can move and thermoregulate the way they want to, you provide fresh water on an almost daily basis, and you miss the substrate, not necessarily the animal, though I miss the animals as well. I think so they're sufficiently hydrated that they're easy to breed, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah, I think as we continue to get further away from, the import stuff and, or at least having very healthy imports, we'll start to, I think others will start to figure it out as more time goes by. But
the biggest killer for most of the imports, just to interrupt slightly, the biggest killer for them is dehydration. It's not necessarily regurgitation. It can follow from an animal can start regurging whenever they're severely dehydrated. I've always told people, if they get a wild caught emerald, forget about putting it into your Zoo Med or Exoterra enclosure, whatever. Put it in a Rubbermaid enclosure with a couple of branches, a heat mat under the bottom of it, a puppy pad on the bottom, and arboreal water bowls, and give it fresh water. Don't try to feed it; just leave it alone. Keep it 84 degrees ambient, and leave it alone for a month or two until it's really well hydrated, and then start offering it food and go from there. And once you get those things hydrated, they're a totally different animal. They're a night and day different than those kind of scraggly kind of wild caughts that come in.
Yeah. And the bad part about dehydration causing regurgitation is the regurgitation makes the dehydration worse, and it's an ugly cycle.
It is, and then it causes scarring of the stomach lining, and that scarring of the stomach lining then affects the cells that are producing digestive. Yeah. So
that's insane.
It's terrible.
All right. My wrap-up question for you. And you've kind of done a good job with this, but I want you to really put on your best sales pitch. Give us your Boa sales pitch. What makes them amazing animals to work with?
I was kind of predicting somebody would ask me this at some point. I've never really came up with an answer because I've never needed it.
Because you're a scientist.
I've been selling boas. I've been breeding and selling boas for 28 years. I just think they're active. They're different in terms of, they're not. I know that people complain about ball pythons being inactive and pet rocks and so on. I don't necessarily agree with that. But a boa constrictor, a boa imperator, or a boa sigma tends to be an active snake. You take it out and they're inquisitive. They come in every color morph you can think of. They produce live babies, which is a really cool thing. Right? When you walk down, and now, because I've produced hundreds of litters, I can tell you if a female is going to produce in the next day or two, just due to their behavior. And seeing a bunch of babies and, coming out of those amniotic sacs is just a really cool process.
Does it smell? I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, it does. Yeah. Yeah, okay. There is. You can walk into that room and you're like, oh yeah, right.
I forgot. There were some breeding questions I want to ask, and that's the big one. So I just
there is. Yeah, and it's interesting because it's weird. I've talked to some people that believe that the Central American boas produce less fluid. I don't know if I necessarily see that, but certainly the big Colombians. I think part of it's just because the Colombian boas produce much bigger litters. With some of these Central American boas, you might be seeing 4 or 5 or 8 babies versus a Colombian boa producing, 45 or 50 potentially at times. I think it's just the mass that is there is just going to, appear different, but it does have an odor to it. But I put in a tub inside the tub whenever they're about to give birth, and I'll put aspen into that there. And that kind of absorbs a lot of the mess, and they tend to go into that tub to give birth. So it's very easy to then lift that out with all the babies in it. But a sales pitch is just simply if you're looking for a snake that is active, that is predictable, that it's always going to feed whenever you want to feed it, and comes in every color of the rainbow. I think they're just a great animal for that. And any size you want. So you really can decide whether you want a 3-foot adult or a potentially 13-foot adult.
Yeah. Sounds like a good sales pitch off the wind. Thank you.
It's worked for me.
Yeah. Dr. Booth, it's been an honor and a pleasure having you. So happy that you agreed, and thank you for being flexible with your time and recording this, especially with something, tomorrow morning, but just wanted to thank you for coming on. It means a lot.
No, I'm happy to. It's we have our own Boas podcast on the NPR network.
Yep.
So we record that frequently, and we're now recording it frequently. And I'm always on a bunch of these different podcasts. It's always fun to talk to people about snakes. I've always said that I can talk all day about snakes. So just give me an excuse,
Yeah. Well,
always happy to.
Yeah. It's a problem at this point, but
yeah, my wife complains about it, but that's about it.
Yeah. Yep. I relate to that one, man.
All right. Well, everyone, make sure you're following Dr. Booth over at BoaBooth on Instagram. Any other plugs you want to give?
I don't think so. I think, most people try to friend me on Facebook and stuff, but if I don't know them, I never really accept it. And also my Facebook, as you know, doesn't have any pictures of snakes on it. It's all family and music and stuff like that. So if you want to keep up to date with snakes, the best one is to go for the Instagram. And also check out the Boas podcast. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a big fan of the NPR network, and I'm subscribed to all of them. But we'll let you go, man. Appreciate you.
Great. Appreciate it, guys. Had fun.
Take care.
Thanks a lot. Take care. Bye.
All right, guys. Awesome episode. There's so much more that we need to dive in with Boas, but just wanted to give a huge shout out to our Patreon members and our sponsors. We appreciate you guys more than you know. If you guys aren't plugged into the Patreon Lounge Discord, there's that link right down below. There it is.
Yep.
We'll catch you next Friday.
All right. See you guys.